let's just take 5 minutes. We'll come back at 1:15 and we'll see if we can work this out. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It looks like the YouTube link is working now if anybody's there.
All right, welcome back. I have received confirmation from several sources that we are now up and streaming on the YouTube site. So thank you for your patience. It is important that I think we have that opportunity for others to watch the proceeding without having to be in on the Zoom call. So thank you. With that, Mr. Bivens, I will turn back to you. And hopefully you remember where we are.
Well, I think we were looking at 503C.
Yes, thank you. So Ms. Mullen, if you can pull up 503C, please.
And this is the page. Very good.
Please go ahead, Mr. Bivens.
I think we had just established Dr. House stands by the flow past second point number there. And of course, Dr. House, the total appropriations you've identified here as 522,831. Those match the appropriations you identified in your sewer rebuttal testimony for 1952, right?
I did say it could be between 516 and 522,000, depending on how one accounts for a certain amount of water that either could have bypassed second point or gone through and made a separate route to north of 46. But if we look over on the left-hand side in the top corner, there's the 19,500.
Well, that's Dr. House, that's okay. I just asked you about the total appropriations number, so I don't know that we need to get into Highway 46. Let's Ms. Mullen, let's now go up to, I think it's PDF page 23. Yeah, I think it's up 2 pages from this. Yes, at the top of this page, we have a graphic for 1941. And here in 1941, Dr. Howes, you've identified the flow past second point as 767,984 acre feet. Is that right?
That's right.
And that's more than 1952, correct?
Just over, yes, about 60,000 acre feet more.
And the total appropriations that you identified under the second point right here is a little less than 200,000 acre feet less than 1952, correct?
Approximately 180,000 acre feet less. That's correct. And I explained in my case in chief why that is.
Indeed. And let's go up one more page, please, Ms. Mullen. And so here for 1938, you've identified the flow past second point as being 711,939 acre feet, correct?
That's correct.
And again, the total appropriation you identified under the second point, right, is roughly 200,000 acre feet less than in 1952, correct?
Correct. As I stated with the last one, that was because it was following a wet year. There wasn't available storage to carry over that water.
So Dr. Howes, I guess my question is, why shouldn't we just extrapolate the appropriations back from 1938 and 1941 rather than 1952?
Oh, well, I believe as part of the hearing officer's initial request that she was asking for the maximum. So 52, the maximum appropriations between this period. So that's, I believe that they intended to use beneficially all water that was available. Because of hydrologic conditions, a wet year following a wet year, they weren't able to appropriate those. In other years, when they followed a dry year, we see consistently higher appropriations, and that would coincide with a maximum appropriation or diversion, if you will. I'd rather use appropriation, which is what the hearing officer was requesting in our case in chief.
Right, and Dr. Howes, you didn't analyze any hydrologic conditions for years circa 1914 in developing this extrapolation, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Dr. Howes, I'd like to talk about physical facilities next. And before we do that, perhaps it would be helpful to get everyone reoriented about those facilities circa 1938, 1952. So Ms. Mullen, if we could go to PDF page 7 on this exhibit, please. And perfect. So Dr. Howes, does this figure accurately represent Buena Vista Water Storage District infrastructure downstream of Second Point between 1938 and 1952?
The portion supplying the portion shown in the map, there is additional infrastructure. That's Buena Vista Water Storage District infrastructure, not shown on the map. But the conveyances at Second Point and past Second Point up to those service areas and the lake, I believe, are consistent and correct.
Okay, and so the main canal is represented by a sort of, on my screen, it looks pink, a sort of pink line with black triangles going to the left on the map directly above the Richfield bypass, correct?
That's correct.
And the main canal could divert water directly from the Kern River to the Buttonwillow service area via the East Side Canal, right?
To the East Side Canal.
Thanks for that clarification. And then the Richfield bypass could carry water from the Kern River channel to the outlet canal, right?
That's correct.
And it's shown in yellow just below the main canal, correct?
That's correct.
Do you happen to know when the Richfield bypass was constructed?
I don't recall off the top of my head.
Do you know whether it was sometime after 1933?
I don't recall.
Do you know whether it was after 1914?
I don't recall.
Okay, let's, Ms. Mullen, bring up cross exhibit KWBA 432, please. And let's scroll down a little bit here, please. Ms. Mullen, towards the bottom of the page. All right, there should be good. So first of all, Dr. Howes, do you have an understanding of what this document is?
I believe it's a quad map.
Quad map, and it appears to be dated 1933, correct?
That I would be very careful of. A lot of these were actually done before it states when it was dated. The edition is a print edition. When it was actually surveyed is likely a different date, much earlier.
How much earlier do you think that could be, Dr. Howes?
I don't know. I haven't looked at this map before.
Okay, but you do see that it's dated 1933, correct?
I see the edition, and that would be coincident of the print date.
Okay, very, very good. And let's scroll down to the next. Oh, actually, before you do that, Ms. Mullen, do you see Coles Levee represented by that red line there on the map just below the Kern River?
Are you asking me?
I am.
Yes, I do.
Okay, great. Now we can scroll to the next page, please, Ms. Mullen. And then let's keep scrolling down here, please, Ms. Mullen. And Dr. Howes, what do you understand this document to be?
It looks like it's also a quad map.
Okay, very good. And it's dated 1954, right?
Again, that would be the print date. I'm not sure when it was actually created.
Okay, fair enough, Dr. Howes. Do you have any understanding of whether this was created before 1914?
I couldn't tell you.
Do you think it's likely that this newer map was created prior to 1914?
I would say
Objection calls for speculation.
I just asked him if he thinks it's likely. I think that's an appropriate opinion.
I think I'm going to allow the question just based on your professional experience, Dr. Howes. If you have an opinion, you can express it, please.
I'll explain the way this typically works is that they create a map and then they edit an existing map. So I would say it's likely that some of this map was created before some early date. Portions of the map were probably added to it at a later date.
Fair enough. Sometime between the 1933 and the 1954 edition, correct?
Objection calls for speculation.
Actually, let me rephrase that. Let's look up just a little bit here on this exhibit, please, Ms. Mullen. So right there, that's perfect. So Dr. Howes, let's just to get reoriented here. You see Coles Levee represented by the red dashed line running horizontally across this map.
Yes,
And then you see the what appears to be the Kern River channel, right?
I see the river channel. Yes, I do.
And then above the river channel, there is a structure that appears to be indicated as the bypass channel. Do you see that?
I do.
And that's in roughly the same location as the Richfield bypass channel depicted on the figure in your exhibit 503C that we were just looking at, correct?
That's correct.
And the 1933 edition map that we previously looked at does not depict this bypass channel, correct?
Again, I don't know that was when it was created. So I'm not sure what date that is. I would prefer not to say specifically what date that was, but yes, the previous map did not display the Richfield bypass, and this map does display the Richfield bypass.
Okay, do you think it's likely that they just left the structure off? I'm sorry, do you think it's likely that they just left the bypass channel off the 1933 edition map?
Like I said, that was-
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm going to sustain the objection. Mr. Bivens, I think we're running around in circles here.
Yeah, and I think I probably made my point.
Okay,
So I'll move
Thank
on.
you.
Let us go back to 503C, please, Ms. Mullen, just where we were. And Dr. Howes, before we move on to the next conveyance structure here, you didn't identify the Richfield bypass as a change in facilities between 1914 and 1952, correct? In your
That's correct.
testimony? Okay. The Alejandro Canal is shown as a teal line just south of the main canal and running southerly toward Buena Vista Lake and the Maples Canal, correct?
That's correct.
And that canal could take water from the Kern River to Buena Vista Lake or the Maples Canal, right?
Yes, for simplicity's sake, yes, it can either or both take water to Buena Vista Lake, or it can supply water to Maples Canal, or it can do both.
Okay, thank you. And then the inlet canal. The inlet canal is also shown in a sort of a teal color coming off the end of the Kern River channel right next to the outlet canal, correct?
That's yes, it parallels the outlet canal just downstream of what was called the waste weir.
Yes, and that inlet canal could take water from the Kern River channel into Buena Vista Lake, right?
It would especially during high flow years. It's the main conveyance.
And then the waste weir there and indicated as a little, I think it's a double yellow line. That would allow Kern River water to be diverted from the channel into the outlet canal, right?
That's right.
And then water in the outlet canal could eventually flow to the east side canal, the west side canal, and then potentially to the flood channel canal, correct?
That's correct. And then it could also, through the flood channel canal, be connected to the 80-foot canal further downstream.
Okay, and the 80-foot canal is that within the Buttonwillow service area?
Yes, it is.
Okay. All right, good. I hope we're sufficiently oriented. I feel oriented. Let's go, Ms. Mullen, to PDF page 14 of Buena Vista 1400, paragraph 29, please. And so, Dr. Howes, you've stated here that the Main and Alejandro canals effectively replace the arrangements involving First Point canals by enabling diversions of water directly from the Kern River at Second Point to the Buttonwillow and Maples service areas through facilities controlled by Buena Vista. Is that right?
Not exactly.
Oh, okay. Help me understand.
So while the Buena Vista farmers and Stein canals are, and Pioneer canals are First Point distribution facilities, they take water, or they were taking water at an alternate Second Point as defined and described by Mr. Ogden in the title insurance case. So they're not First Point. It's not First Point water. It's Second Point water taken at alternate Second Point.
Oh, I appreciate that, but you've called them First Point canals here, correct?
Can you point to that exactly where I said that?
The very beginning of line 19.
They were First Point canals, but the water wasn't taken at First Point. It was taken at an alternate Second Point.
Understood. And why do you call them First Point canals, Dr. Howes?
Because they supplied the First Point group as defined in my original case in chief technical memorandum.
Okay, thank you. Glad we could clear that up. When you use the phrase First Point canals, you're specifically referring to the Buena Vista, Stein, Farmers, and Pioneer canals mentioned in paragraph 28. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. And if I understand your testimony, the construction of the Main and Alejandro canals, the diversion weir that enabled diversions of water from the Kern River Channel into those canals, and the levees and cells constructed in Buena Vista Lake are the only changes in infrastructure that you've identified between 1914 and 1938. Is that right?
That's correct.
And maybe we would add the Richfield bypass to that, but you're not sure.
It's possible, but I'm not sure.
Okay. So let's scroll down, please, Ms. Mullen, to paragraph 31. And Dr. Howes, I understand your opinion in paragraph 31 to be that Buena Vista's ability to use the Main and Alejandro canals would have no impact on the volume of water appropriated under the Second Point entitlement in the wettest years. Is that right?
That's my belief.
Okay. What did you do to investigate that belief, Dr. Howes?
Well, I have a lot of experience in water routing, understanding how the water moved and a detailed understanding of how water moved in 1938 through 52. Also reading previous accounts of how water was managed by Mr. Rice and Mr. Ogden. The key here is to understand how water moved downstream of Second Point, and water moving into the Buena Vista Lake, why they were moving water in, how they managed and regulated water coming out when that lake got full, and how the water would then move after that. The Main Canal and Alejandro canals would have no impact on that overall operation during a wet year.
Okay. Dr. House, I didn't hear you say that you compared the relative capacities of the Main and Alejandro canals to the First Point canals identified in your testimony. You didn't do that, right?
No, I did not.
Okay.
I don't, can you back up? There was no need to do that, I should say. Because the First Point canals that were used during drier years. And so there was no need to analyze the capacities between those canals and the Main and Alejandro. All we're worried about is what's happening within Buena Vista's facilities downstream of Second Point. That's going to be key. And the inlet canal had more than sufficient capacity. Any capacity in the Main and Alejandro would have been a minuscule amount compared to the overall inlet canal capacity into Buena Vista. So they could choose to use an alternate route, but the overall capacities of those canals at the time of 1952 and earlier would have no impact on overall capacity within and downstream of Second Point.
So let me make sure I understand your testimony here, Dr. House. Prior to the construction of the Main and Alejandro canals in the wettest years, it's your testimony that these First Point canals you identified were not being used to deliver water to what is now the Buena Vista service area. Is that right?
I'm saying that they wouldn't have needed to.
Okay. Do you know whether they did?
I don't know. I don't have any records that indicate one way or another during a wet year. Mr. Ogden does describe using those during normal year operations. Specifically, we hear the issue with trying to supply the Maples service area during drier years when they couldn't fill up Buena Vista Lake. And it wouldn't supply the canal that served Maples, so they had to use an alternate second route. And that's the main reason that they built the Alejandro.
So circa 1914, Dr. House, what channels and facilities were used to bring water to the Buena Vista service area and Buena Vista Lake Reservoir in the wettest years?
The water would pass the second, you say circa 1914?
Correct.
The inlet canal, well, the river channel acted as a conveyance. It would bring water into the inlet canal, at which point the reservoir would fill. They could, if they wanted to, direct water in from the waste weir to put water directly into the outlet canal and not turn it in from Buena Vista Lake Reservoir. But as they typically describe, they tried to fill the reservoir and then they would route water, or at the same time route water, regulated flow from the outlet gates, which are on Buena Vista Lake Reservoir, and supply the outlet weir or outlet canal. The outlet canal then runs north to Buena Vista Buttonwillow service area. There's a direct connection between the Maples and Buena Vista Lake Reservoir. That facility would have been supplied during a wet year directly from the lake.
Okay, so let me just see if I can boil that down and list the facilities that would have been available to convey water to the Buena Vista service area and Buena Vista Lake Reservoir during the wettest years. We would have the inlet canal. We would have the outlet canal. We would have the east side and the west side canal. Is that right?
Okay.
Objection compound.
We have let's
Let me rule on the
bring up the
objection.
map again, and I'd be happy to
Oh,
show you
yes.
the route.
Let's do that. That is a much better way of doing this.
And we'll go through it one at a time. We'll avoid the compound issue.
Indeed. Okay, Ms. Mullen, can we have 503C back up on the screen, please?
Oh, no.
This looks worrisome.
Oh, no,
Well, give it a moment.
this has been quite a day for technical problems.
I have had this issue trying to look at exhibits in this hearing myself.
You do, I think what winds up happening is that we're all using the same exhibits and Ms. Mullen is appropriately keeping a lot of tabs open. And at some point, it becomes overwhelming for Adobe. I don't know how to help you with that, Ms. Mullen.
We'll just give her a moment. We have time.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mullen. Uh-oh. So, hmm. Ms. Mullen, you may want to, unfortunately, I'm sorry, I'm offering unsolicited advice, but you may want to end the Adobe task and close out and come back to this. I suspect this freezing problem will continue.
Sounds like good advice to me. We're troubleshooting in the background, so I appreciate your patience.
Understood.
Ms. Kinsey, can I suggest maybe a 5-minute break at this point and straighten this out, and that way we won't take 1 or 2?
It's a good idea. Okay, let's do 5 minutes. It's 1:44. We'll come back at 1:49. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, now I'm having reports that we're having trouble with the screen share, so we're devolving a little bit. I apologize. What we're going to do is have to take another 5-minute break. I think we're going to have to change our staff person who will be bringing up exhibits. It might be a computer require a reboot. So let's go ahead and take another 5-minute break. Thank you for your patience. We'll reconvene at 1:55 and hopefully we'll have this all resolved. Thank you. All right, we now appear to have screen share. We have moved over to Mr. Wooldridge, who is now manning the screen share here. I'm sure if you accidentally refer to Mr. Wooldridge as Ms. Mullen, we'll know what you mean. But we will try this. Ms. Mullen is I think her computer needed a break. So we're working that out. But if you would please be patient with Mr. Wooldridge, he's very good, but he has not had as much practice. And I will turn things back over to you, Mr. Bivens. I know we were looking at a map. I'm not sure what page that was. So if you could refresh our memory on what page Mr. Wooldridge should bring up here.
I believe it was page 7 of the PDF, Mr. Wooldridge, and thank you for your service. And I will offer that if we continue to have issues, Ms. Kenzie, Ms. Tokar could become the screen sharer for this cross-examination in a pinch. She's, I'm sure she's known Ms. Mullen, but she is pretty good.
Thank you.
Okay, and Mr. Wooldridge, if we could just scroll down here so we can get the whole figure. Yes, and actually, Mr. Wooldridge, if you would scroll down just a little more to see the caption so we can confirm this is the same 38 to 52, and it appears to be. So, Dr. Howes, would you please identify the facilities for the diversion of water during the wettest years circa 1914 that were available for use by Miller and Lux?
Yes, I do want to qualify that obviously with the alternate second points, there could be, those could be considered available. They weren't used, so I'm not going to refer to that. But I will discuss the facilities that were identified for use in those years, or in some of those years anyways. We start with second point, and I will start with the two that we discussed. Alejandro and the main canal were available, although they are their primary use will be for, or would have been and were for a drier year.
Dr. House, I think you may have misunderstood my question. So let me just clarify and make sure that's the case. Are you saying that the Main and Alejandro canals were available in 1914?
Oh, did you say 1914? I'm sorry. I thought you said 1938 to 52.
No. I know those ones. I'd like you to identify the facilities that were available circa 1914, please.
Okay. Like I previously stated, the Pioneer, Farmer, Stein, and Buena Vista may have been available. I don't imagine them being utilized. I don't have any records of them being utilized during a wet year. If we go down, we can see that the river channel conveys water, or what is called the river channel conveys water downstream of Second Point. The Richfield bypass may have been available, or some route thereabouts may have been available, but I am not aware of that. If we continue towards on this light blue line that's identified as Kern River, but is downstream of Second Point, you'll see that we get to the waste weir, and then continuing down to where the arrow is on what's called the inlet canal. That's the primary supply source during a wet year of Buena Vista Lake. That's the primary supply source for any year to Buena Vista Lake circa 1914. Then we have during a wet year, there was a channel that, and I'm not sure if it's, I believe it's nearly the same alignment of the Maples Canal, but I'm not sure if it's the same exact alignment or capacity. That would have taken water from Buena Vista Lake Reservoir into what is now the Maples service area. The kind of magenta line labeled on the outlet canal would have taken water regulated from Buena Vista Lake Reservoir, metered to the Button Willows service area to the north. I prefer the facilities that are within the Buttonwillow service area, such as the Flood Channel Canal, the West Side Canal, and the East Side Canal, and many of the laterals. I'm not going to discuss those individually. They are within the Buttonwillow service area, and those would have been supplied by the outlet canal at potentially different locations, but still the outlet canal is the main supply source during a wet year.
Okay, so just so we're clear, the main canal and the Alejandro Canal and possibly the Richfield bypass on this figure were not available to Miller and Lux circa 1914. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and the first point canals that you identified in your written testimony may have been available, but you don't think they were used during the wettest years, correct?
I can't say one way or another. The reasoning that Mr. Ogden gave for wanting to replace the alternate second point with the Alejandro, or why they used the alternate second points, were not valid during a wet year. Therefore, that's where my conclusion came from.
Okay, and I'm good with that, Dr. House. That means we can avoid a detailed comparison of capacities, and I think everyone will probably appreciate that. So, Dr. House, in 1952, were all of the facilities that you identified as being available to Miller and Lux circa 1914 used for the appropriation of water under the second point entitlement?
If I believe that you asked the question, basically, was the inlet canal and the outlet canal used and Buena Vista Lake Reservoir in 1952 or 1938 to 52? They were.
And the river channel as well in 1952 specifically.
Oh, yes, that absolutely.
Okay, I don't want to leave anything out. Were the main canal and the Alejandro Canal also used to appropriate water under the second point right in 1952?
A small amount.
Okay, and let's pull up Buena Vista 304, please, Mr. Woolridge. And Dr. Howes, do you see that this exhibit is entitled Distribution of Kern River Water Below the Second Point of Measurement, 1952?
Yes, I do.
Have you seen this document before?
Yes, I have.
I thought so. Can we scroll to PDF page 2, please, Mr. Woolridge? All right, and yes, that is a good level of perfect level of zoom. Well, I can see it. It's perfect for me. So we'll start there and see what happens. Dr. Howes, what does this table show?
This is the distribution of flows past second point. It's actually the distribution of flows by Buena Vista. And this is the monthly average, or not the monthly average, the monthly volume of the distribution of water. I used it extensively for the 1952 analysis that I conducted.
And you think this is a reliable record, correct?
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay, and so columns 3 through 8 specifically show the distribution of total flow past second point for 1952 on a monthly basis with annual totals at the end of the columns, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and by the distribution of total flow for, let's say, the inlet canal, that would refer to the amount of water that was appropriated through that facility for 1952, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, and for the main canal, do you see that the total listed at the bottom of column 4 was 103,759 acre feet?
I do.
And do you see for the Alejandro Canal that the total flow past second point is 9,437 acre feet?
Yes, I do.
And for the Richfield bypass, I think the number appears to be 96,223 acre feet. Is that right?
I would agree with that.
Okay, and certainly for the main canal and the Alejandro Canal, those facilities were not available to Miller and Lux in 1914, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and the Richfield bypass, you're not sure about, but it may not have been available, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and just one more question. Do you see that for the months of April, May, and June, there is water being conveyed through the inlet canal at the same time as there is water being conveyed through the main and Alejandro canals? Is that right?
It looks like about 10% of the volume, or yeah, 10% of the volume is conveyed through the main and Alejandro that's conveyed through the inlet.
And
Ballpark
for the,
estimate.
okay, and for the Richfield bypass is also conveying flows during those same months, right?
That's correct.
And so if we add the total of the main Alejandro and Richfield canals, I think we're looking at something like 200,000 acre feet of water through those facilities in 1952. Is that right?
That seems about right.
Okay. Let's go, please, Mr. Wooldridge, to KWBA. Actually, before we do that, Dr. Howes, did you happen to watch Dr. Littlefield's cross-examination this morning?
Yes, I did.
And do you recall my showing him Hammett's projection tables from the 1927 district plan?
Yes, I do.
Did you consider those tables in developing your opinion that changes in facilities between 1914 and 1938 would not have materially changed how water was managed and used under the second point right in wet maximum appropriation years?
Objection, compound, and vague and ambiguous as to tables.
Do I need to bring them up? I can bring them up, Ms. Kenzie.
I'm going to overrule the objection. Dr. Howes, though, if you are not sure about what Mr. Bivens is asking you, please feel free to say so.
I understand those tables. If he could just be explicit on the question that he's trying to ask me about them, that would be ideal.
So the question that I'm trying to ask you, Dr. Howes, is whether you considered those tables in developing your opinion that changes in facilities between 1914 and 1938 would not have materially changed how water was managed and used under the second point right in wet maximum appropriation years.
I have looked at those tables. I have not utilized them because they are projections. So I would say that no, they did not come into play when I made that assessment, although I have looked at them, and but I have not cannot think of how they would have affected my opinion on that.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Wooldridge, now we can go to KWBA 218, please. And let's go to PDF page 20, please, Mr. Wooldridge. Dr. House, do you see that this is a report of the Buena Vista Water Storage District to the District Securities Commission dated December 31st, 1933?
It looks like that.
And let's scroll to, excuse me, PDF page 22, please, Mr. Wooldridge. Do you see under item Roman numeral 7, subitem E, water supply, subitem 3, capacity of reservoir, that the capacity of the Buena Vista Lake Reservoir is listed as 209,000 acre feet.
I do see that. I'm not sure what the 12,500 acre feet means to the right of that, though.
Me either, but we don't need to explore that one quite yet. Let's go to PDF page 70, please, Mr. Wooldridge. And do you see, Dr. Howes, that this is a report of the Buena Vista Water Storage District to the District Securities Commission dated January 15th, 1939?
Yes, I do.
And let's go to PDF page 72, please, Mr. Wooldridge. Okay. Same general area. Item or Roman numeral 7, subitem E, this time subheading 4, reservoir capacity, 232,329. Do you see that?
I do.
You understand that to be referring to the capacity of the Buena Vista Lake Reservoir?
I would assume so, unless they have other reservoirs that they're trying to incorporate there.
You're not aware of any other reservoirs that were constructed between 1933 and 1939, right?
No, I'm not.
Okay. You didn't investigate whether Buena Vista increased the storage capacity of Buena Vista Lake Reservoir in reaching the opinions you expressed about physical changes to Buena Vista's facilities between 1948 and 1938, did you, Dr. House?
No, I didn't.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Wooldridge, let's go back to Dr. House's written testimony, BV 1400, paragraph 33. I confess I don't have the page number for you, but probably give it a guess. Let's go to, yeah. Oh, good. You're quick. Okay. So Dr. Howes, you've stated that appropriations under the second point, right, in 1906 were probably higher than 1952, right?
Given that they were wetter years, it's entirely possible. Yes.
Okay, and so what are your basis? If we look at paragraph 32, you've indicated that first point flows in 1906 were approximately 1.9 million acre feet, right? If you look at line 19, and I'll read it for you, measured total flows at first point in 1906 and 1916 were approximately 1.9 million acre feet and 2.0 million acre feet respectively.
That's correct.
Okay. Right. So 1.9 million acre feet of first point flow in 1906. that a yes?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry.
Okay,
I
thank you.
said it, I guess I didn't say it loud enough. Sorry about that.
Thank you. And in 1952, measured first point flows were approximately 1.5 million acre feet, right?
I believe that's correct. Yes, it's in the on line 17.
Yes. And if you conducted any, I'm sorry, have you conducted any specific investigation or analysis of water use by Miller and Luck specifically in 1906?
No, I have not.
So the only basis for your opinion that appropriations were likely higher in 1906 than in 1952 is the difference between measured first point flows in those years. Is that fair?
Objection, misstates testimony.
Will you rephrase the question, please, Mr. Bivens?
Sure. Dr. Howes, other than the difference in first point measured flows in 1906 and 1952, do you have any other basis for your opinion that diversions in 1906 were probably higher than in 1952?
I think a lot goes into that analysis, and that opinion, besides just the overall river hydrology, considering the agronomic aspects, the area north of Wasco Road, the operations as described by Mr. Ogden and Mr. Rice. So I'd hate to simplify it to simply one number, because a lot more went into that overall statement than just the overall first point flows.
But of course, you didn't list any of those other factors in your survey testimony, right?
Oh, sure I did. It's all leading up to this. All of it works together. So, I mean, I've talked about Mr. Ogden and Mr. Rice, Mr. Marchetti. I've described the infrastructure. I think it all works together to form my opinion.
So your opinion about, your opinion about Mr. Rice and Mr. Marchetti, of course, has to do with flows north of Wasco Road, correct?
Yes.
Okay. You are saying, however, here that there's probably a relationship between unimpaired Kern River flows at first point and appropriations of water under the second point, right? Correct?
That's a very simple way to put it. We know that there's a relationship, given that the law of the river is in and of itself a relationship. So I don't know that. Please clarify that question.
No, I don't know. I'm literally just asking you, do you think there's a relationship between unimpaired Kern River flows at first point and appropriations of water under the second point, right?
I believe there's a relationship.
Okay.
I know there's a relationship in the 1888 Miller-Hagen agreement as well. So
No, that's all I needed, Dr. Howes. It's not a trick question. In paragraph 33, and let's go ahead and scroll down, please, Mr. Wooldridge. You go on to suggest that as a ballpark estimate, appropriations under the second point right in 1906 probably were closer to Buena Vista's 1969 appropriation of an estimated 573,737 acre feet, and its 2017 appropriation of an estimated 565,987 acre feet. Is that your testimony?
that's yes, it is.
You use the phrase ballpark estimate. What does that word ballpark mean in your mind?
It means that it's around, has some uncertainty, likely. I wouldn't be able to tell you because there are really no good flow records in 1906 and 1916. So we would have liked to have been able to narrow that down. But given the conditions in 1952, given the conditions in 1969, given the infrastructure conditions and operations circa 1914, I believe that there were within the same range of probably plus or minus 30,000 acre feet.
Okay, and you use the phrase uncertainty, which I wanna come back to. But actually, let me take a little different tack here, Dr. House. You've characterized your opinion about estimating 1914 appropriations in your rebuttal testimony using appropriations from 1952 as an extrapolation. Is that right?
Extrapolation back in time,
Yes.
that's the wording I used.
Okay. And you've specifically stated in your rebuttal testimony that the extrapolation that you've done is an appropriate statistical practice. Is that right?
I noted in my rebuttal testimony, you have to have a physical basis for extrapolation. I believe I've shown the physical basis for that extrapolation.
And so you believe that your extrapolation of 1952 appropriations back to 1914 is an appropriate statistical practice, right?
I believe that it's appropriate.
Okay. I'll tell you what, we probably ought to just go look for that word statistical. So let me find in your testimony, Dr. House, exactly where this was, and we can look at it on the screen. Okay, let's go to paragraph 31, please, Mr. Waters. So starting at line 5 there, Dr. House, you've stated it is an appropriate statistical practice to extrapolate the 1938 and 1952 water use analysis in my opening testimony back to circa 1914 as an estimate of water use at that earlier time. Is that still your testimony?
That's still my testimony.
Okay. If we go back to paragraph, I think we were on 33. You are also suggesting that we could extrapolate 2017 appropriations under what you call the second point, right, as an estimate of circa 1914 appropriations, correct?
Well, I didn't.
Objection, misstates testimony.
Well, and I think Dr. House was about to point that out, but if Mr. Bivens, if you would please ask the question a little more carefully, stick with the written testimony.
Yeah, Dr. House, you have suggested here that appropriations under the second point right, 1906 and 1916, were probably closer to the 2017 appropriation of an estimated 565,987 acre feet. Is that right?
I also said 1969 there, 573. So
Right.
I just to be clear on the record, and so yeah, I believe that a ballpark estimate that 1906 and 1916 could very well be very close to 1969 and 2017 values. That Miller and Lux circa 1914 were trying to maximize their beneficial use downstream of Second Point, and they would have used the facilities and the acreage to do that.
And when you explained what you meant by the phrase ballpark estimate, you indicated that there was some uncertainty in your estimate. Is that fair?
That's fair.
And in your written rebuttal testimony, you did not attempt to quantify the uncertainty associated with your ballpark estimate, correct?
That's not entirely correct. I state that my original estimate of 566,000 to 605,000 from Dr. David's corrected analysis is likely the ballpark value falls within that range. That range in and of itself is a range of uncertainty potentially.
Are there statistical techniques that can be used to quantify uncertainty?
There are if you have the data to analyze it.
And you've not attempted to quantify the uncertainty associated with your ballpark estimate in those ways, correct?
The data is not available to quantify that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. House. So calculated first point flows in 1969 were approximately 2.5 million acre feet, right? You probably need to scroll up.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, and why don't we scroll up a little bit, please, Mr. Wooldridge? Let's look at paragraph.
You're asking about 1969?
Yeah, I'm asking about first point flows in
At
1960.
Line 18.
Yes.
Mr. Bivens.
Yes, perfect. So Dr. House calculated total first point unimpaired flows in 1969 were approximately 2.5 million acre feet, right?
Yes, they were.
Okay, and that is approximately 600,000 acre feet higher than in 1906, right?
The 1906 value is down below. Can you scroll up a little? Or there it is, 1.9. You're right, that is correct. 2.5 is about 600,000 acre feet greater than the 1906 value.
Okay, and then so for 2017, calculated first point unimpaired flows for 2 million acre feet, right?
That's correct.
And that's 100,000 acre feet more than the first point flow measured in 1906, correct?
I would be careful saying the measured flow at first point in 1906. I've read a number of documents that have suggested there were issues in the measurement at first point in 1906. With that qualification, the data that I have shown here, you're correct. It's 100,000 acre feet more than 1906 and approximately the same as in 1916.
And whatever the data is for measured flows in 1906, you used a measured flow data for 1906 here in your written rebuttal testimony, right?
Yes.
Okay. You would agree that there have been changes in how Miller and Lux and Buena Vista have routed, managed, and applied water under the second point right between 1914 and 2017, correct?
Objection, vague and ambiguous. I can explain if you'd like.
You know what? I can rephrase and we can
Okay.
go through a document.
Let's do that. Thank you, Mr. Bivens.
Let's pull up Buena Vista 503C, please, Mr. Wooldridge. And can we go to PDF page 2, please? Okay. Let's go to the first sentence of the third paragraph, please. Ah, there we go, right there. That first sentence there in that, well, okay, we can see the first, we can see a full paragraph on this page, Dr. House.
Mhm.
The first sentence reads, conditions have changed over the past 80 years in BVWSD and are continuing to change throughout the region, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and that's still your testimony.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And let's go to page 5, please, Mr. Wooldridge. And let's scroll down just a hair. Perfect. And there's a heading here on this page of your testimony, Dr. Howes, and it reads infrastructure changes. And let's take a look at take a quick detour. Let's take a look at the second sentence of the paragraph under that heading. You wrote, if runoff exceeded this storage, referring to Buena Vista Lake Reservoir on Kern Lake, excess water would flow into Tulare Lake. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. Have you investigated the years in which excess water flowed into Tulare Lake circa 1914?
No, that information was not available.
Oh, okay. Let's go to page 37, please, Mr. Woolridge. And can we scroll down a bit to the second paragraph on this page? There we go. And let me find my line. So you've indicated here, Dr. Howes, in the second paragraph that Buena Vista Water Storage District in 2017 was able to use groundwater storage facilities upstream and downstream of Second Point, right?
Yes, they were.
And those groundwater storage facilities were not available to Miller and Lux circa 1914, correct?
I'm not sure about that. I think Dr. Littlefields testified that there was groundwater pumping in Buena Vista circa 1914. That water has to get to those wells in some way. So I believe that it would be improper to assume that there wasn't some sort of mechanism for water to recharge those wells circa 1914. Upstream of Second Point, however, I couldn't tell you. I did not look upstream of Second Point circa 1914.
And Dr. Howes, have you seen any evidence in the record to suggest that there were facilities upstream and downstream of Second Point that were constructed for the purpose of groundwater storage?
The objection vague and ambiguous.
Let me rephrase. Dr. Howes, have you seen any evidence in the record, the historical record, circa 1914, to suggest that groundwater storage facilities had been constructed upstream or downstream of Second Point?
Objection vague and ambiguous.
Objection, relevance, undue consumption of time.
Let's go to the relevance first. Mr. Bivens,
Well,
where are we going with this?
we are going with Dr. Howes has suggested that the appropriations in 2017 that he calculated in his case in chief testimony are probably a closer estimate than 1952 appropriations for Miller and Lux circa 1914. In his case in chief testimony, he also identified in this paragraph here, groundwater storage facilities upstream and downstream of Second Point that were utilized by Buena Vista Water Storage District to appropriate water. So I don't think it gets much more relevant than that.
I'm wondering if I can ask a question here that might help cut through this, if I can formulate it. Well, let's try it again. Mr. Bivens, maybe try your question again, but let's be specific on the geographic area. Are we talking, I think you included both upstream and downstream of Second Point. And then I think you're also going to have to lay a foundation of what you mean by groundwater storage facilities, but probably can do it based on what is written here.
Yes, I would hope, so. Okay, Dr. Howes, when you refer to groundwater storage facilities in this paragraph, what facilities are you talking about?
Any facilities that would be used to store groundwater. So flood channel canal, to the river channel. There are specific ponds and facilities that may also be available. So facilities is very general. My term here is very general as I discuss it.
So you mentioned ponds and other facilities. What do you mean by that?
There are specific recharge areas similar to Kern Water Bank Authority. It may even include Kern Water Bank Authority, but those facilities are only a portion of that term facility. And there are also the typical recharge from the facilities that Buena Vista manages is also included in that groundwater recharge statement.
And other than the Kern Water Bank, are there other water banking facilities that you would say were available in 2017?
If I remember correctly, it's been a while, but there was Pioneer. The Pioneer project was available. 2017, I believe a portion of the Palms facilities within Buena Vista was available. There could be others that I just don't remember.
So in that last category of, we'll call it recharge ponds and banking facilities, were any facilities like that available to Miller and Lux circa 1914 upstream of Second Point?
Objection, relevance, undue consumption of time.
I'll overrule the objection. You may respond, Dr. House.
I don't know.
How about downstream of Second Point, Dr. House?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Let's, maybe I can short circuit some of my line of questions about infrastructure changes between 1914 and 2017. Let's see how this goes. Let's go to page 38, please, Mr. Woolridge. Okay, and Dr. Housen, in 2017, you have identified a total appropriation under the Second Point right of 565,987 acre feet, correct?
That's correct.
And then right below that number, you have a box and it's labeled BVWSD appropriations upstream of Second Point. Do you see that?
I do.
Okay, and you have identified a total of 360,359 acre feet of BVWSD appropriations upstream of Second Point for 2017, correct?
That's correct.
And of that total, roughly 51,000 acre feet are attributable to storage and losses in Isabella, right?
That's correct.
And then another 309,396 acre feet are attributable to banking, transfers, and exchanges. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that number exceeded the storage capacity of Buena Vista Lake available to Miller and Lux circa 1914 by approximately 160,000 acre feet. Is that right?
No, you mean the 309?
Yeah, no, the 360,359.
Approximately 150,000. But you have to remember the operations in 2017 post California Aqueduct. A lot of that exchange water was direct exchange for direct water from the California Aqueduct. So that water would have normally flowed over Second Point and into Buena Vista's service areas through the Kern River. It's just rerouted into state facilities into those same service areas. So I don't think I'm not sure if you quite understand the nuances of how it operates, how the real operation occurs in terms of those exchanges upstream upstream of Second Point. They're really not a transfer, if you will, as much as it's just an exchange with another party for a separate molecule of water, but it's the same water.
Yeah, maybe I don't understand all the nuances, Dr. House, but isn't it true that the infrastructure needed to facilitate those exchanges, such as the California Aqueduct, was not available to Miller and Lux circa 1914?
Oh, that's true.
Okay, great. Let's switch gears a little bit, and I'll be quick, and then maybe it'll be time for a break. Same general thought. Let's look at your figure. Actually, oh, we're in the right spot. In this figure, you've identified no water passing Highway 46, correct?
That's correct.
And Highway 46 and Wasco Road are the same thing?
That's correct.
And that means no Kern River water reached Tulare Lake in 2017, right?
I'm not sure about that. There may have been Kern River water that routed to Tulare Lake a different way, but no water went through the flood channel canal past Highway 46. That's all I can verify.
Okay, I'm good with that. Did you investigate whether Kern River water reached Tulare Lake via the flood channel canal in 1906 or 1916?
I believe in Mr. Ogden's testimony, he said water went past Wasco Road, but I can't remember exactly all the details. That's what I remember hearing. 1916, I believe there was a pumper from the interview notes, a pumper at Hart Station. Hart Station's on the corner of Wasco Road and the flood channel, that noted that that there was water north of Highway 46.
Okay, and we will definitely be looking at those notes, Dr. House. But as you sit here today, you don't have any idea how much Kern River water may have reached Tulare Lake in 1906 via the flood channel canal, correct?
Objection, relevance, undue consumption of time.
Overruled.
No, I don't.
And then the same question for 1916. You don't have any sense of how much Kern River water may have reached Tulare Lake in 1916 via the flood channel canal, correct?
No, I don't.
Okay. I could use a break, Ms. Kenzie. I don't know if anybody else could.
I think we're all ready for a break. It is 2:44. Let's just come back at 2:55 p.m. Before we go, though, Mr. Bivens, would you provide some estimate of how much more cross-examination you think you have for Dr. House?
I would guess roughly an hour to an hour and a half. I have been very constrained by the technical difficulties today, and I do have a lot of questions for Dr. House about Wasco Road.
All right. We need to get through it today, but it sounds like that's still possible. So we'll move forward, but let's come back at 2:55. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, it is 2:56. Let's go back on the record and I will turn things back over to you, Mr. Bivens. Oh, and I did want to note, we have, I believe, transferred it back to Ms. Mullen, who will once again be handling the file sharing.
I don't know if I could handle all this confusion, Ms. Kenzie. All right, Ms. Mullen, we're glad to have you back. Just got used to saying Mr. Wooldridge, so forgive me if I slip up. Can we please pull up Dr. House's testimony, exhibit Buena Vista 1400, please? And I'd like to go to the top of PDF page 11. I want to look at this. That's perfect. This first bullet point right here, in which you've stated, when put to the question by the state engineer in the 1920s, Miller and Lux chose to concentrate the water available to it under the second point right in Buena Vista. When you use the word concentrate in that sentence, Dr. House, what do you mean?
I mean, as I described earlier, the prior to district formation, prior to the 1920s, when the district was formed, Buena Vista, or I'm sorry, Miller and Lux and other second point users were utilizing water on up to or over 78,000 acres of potentially irrigated land, depending on the water year. What they decided to do in the when put to the question by the state engineer, as I'm quoting myself there, the state engineer said, you can't have 78,000 acres. You don't have enough reliable water supply to have 78,000 acres. Miller and Lux were then forced to concentrate the water that they used on 78,000 acres onto 46,500 irrigable acres, or just over 50,000 total boundary acres. That is Buena Vista Water Storage District today.
And just to be clear, you're not offering a legal opinion in that sentence, right?
I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I wouldn't offer a legal opinion. That's
Okay,
just what happened.
good. Okay. When you developed your opinion that Miller and Lux chose to concentrate the water available to it, did you consider the 1927 quitclaim from Miller and Lux to Buena Vista?
I believe that's the statement where Miller and Lux made the lands north of 46 subordinate to lands south of 46. Is that the claim you're referring to?
I mean, we could pull it up. I just want to know if you considered the 1927 quitclaim that's referenced in Dr. Miltenberger's testimony in developing your opinion about the concentration of the second point right.
Objection, vague and ambiguous.
I guess I can pull it up if I need to, Ms. Kenzie.
I don't think no, I'm going to overrule the objection. You can answer, Dr. House, or reply that you don't know.
That term quitclaim I'm not that familiar with, so I'm not sure if I did or didn't.
Okay, let's pull up exhibit KWBA 17, please. Dr. House, did you consider the document on the screen in front of you in developing your opinion about the concentration of the second point right?
I relied on Dr. Littlefield's testimony, and he may have relied on this, so it does not look familiar to me. But I've looked at a lot of documents as well, so I very well could have through Dr. Littlefield. But I Is there something specific that you want to point to that you're referring to?
No, that's okay. If you didn't refer to this document specifically, we don't need to talk about it. Ms. Mullen, can we have exhibit KWBA 51, please?
How many pages is that? 7?
That's a 7-page document. This one's a 2-page document, and same question, Dr. House. Did you consider this document containing an exhibit KWBA 51 in forming your opinion about the concentration of the second point right?
Can I read it?
Sure. I will tell you that I won't ask you any questions about it if you didn't consider it.
Can you please scroll down? Thank you. Ms. Mullins. Scroll down further, please. I considered a statement that is similar to that statement in number 2, but I believe the wording was a little different. Can you please scroll down? Right there. I believe I remember reading this. And another document that was similar that said they give priority for the water south of for land south of Wasco Road. So I do believe I read this, but I don't know that this was specifically where I came up with that. I do remember some additional wording. Maybe you have some other documents you want to ask me about, but
Well, I guess, since we're a little vague about whether you did or didn't review this, but you've indicated a specific statement in this document that looks familiar. Just to ask you, do you recall reviewing the statement in paragraph 3 on this page and forming your opinion about the concentration of the second point right?
no, I don't recall that.
Okay, thanks, Dr. House. I'm done with this exhibit. Ms. Mullen, thank you. Let's see, bopping around here. Let's go to Dr. House's technical memorandum, which is Buena Vista 1402, please. And let's scroll down just a hair, please. Ms. Mullen. Almost said Mr. Wooldridge. Last sentence of that second paragraph there, Dr. House, you wrote, it is important to understand the cultural practices circa 1914 in order to understand water demands and supplies north of Wasco Road at the time. Is that right?
That's right.
And the cultural practices you're referring to are also specific to Wasco, lands north of Wasco Road, correct?
Objection, misstates testimony.
I just like to clarify his testimony. When you refer to cultural practices, are you referring to cultural practices on lands north of Wasco Road as well as generally?
Yeah, generally and north of Wasco Road. So cultural practices go all the way from water operations from all of Miller and Lux and Second Point user operations. So
Okay, and then it looks to me like, let's scroll down a hair, Ms. Mullen, please. It looks to me, Dr. House, like in this technical memorandum, you discuss those cultural practices over the next three paragraphs that continue on to page 2. Is that right?
can we continue to scroll, please? Scroll down. A little bit. Yeah, next page. Can pause there. So it continues through the second page, Mr. Bivens. Is that what
Yeah,
you-
and then after that, after the end of that paragraph on the second page there, you go on to discuss other evidence that shows how those cultural practices you discussed integrated with Miller and Lux's water management, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right, now that we kind of have the structure of this part of your technical memorandum, in describing Miller and Lux's cultural practices as they relate to water demands and supplies north of Wasco Road, you rely on historical materials, correct?
That's correct.
And one of those historical materials is Exhibit Buena Vista 1309, right?
That's correct.
And in discussing Buena Vista 1309, and let's scroll up here, please, Ms. Mullen. Yeah, past we got to get back into cultural practices and out of other evidence. The next page, please. Thank you. I think right there. I think right there. Okay. So in discussing Exhibit Buena Vista 1309, you've specifically called out an April 10th, 1920 interview with Mr. Frank Rice, in which he explained the game is to farm every year sufficiently to break even and to depend upon the occasional good year to make a killing. Is that right?
That's right.
If we look at the end of the last paragraph here on page 1, are we on page 1? I think we're on. Can we make sure we're on page 1, please, Ms. Mullen? Okay. You state that one method employed by Miller and Lux and other Second Point Group water users was to farm as much land and crops as possible during wet years and then store extra hay. Is that right?
I did state that. I'm not sure exactly where you're referring to it on this page, but I do remember stating that. Yes.
Okay.
I see it now. It's on the very bottom paragraph, second to last sentence.
Yes. Let's pull up Exhibit Buena Vista, or actually, I'm sorry. And then you indicate that this method is clear in Mr. Rice's statement about depending on the occasional good year to make a killing, right?
That's how they would have stored extra hay, or that's how they would have made a killing, is to make more money, store hay, for example, and money, I said in that as well.
Yes. Okay. Now let's pull up Buena Vista 1309, please. And Ms. Mullen, if I could have PDF page 9, please. So, Dr. Howes, this is a document dated April 10th, 1920. And I just like to confirm, is this the interview with Mr. Rice you referred to in your technical memorandum?
Yes, it is.
And if we scroll down a couple pages to PDF 11, that's where the April 10th interview ends, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Okay. There's nothing in this interview that's specific to Miller and Lux's land north of Wasco Road, right?
There is, I believe, certain tracks between Button Willow and Roscoe Road. Yeah, I don't recall. I was thinking that one, if we could scroll up the previous page. I know it does not look like there's any that I can see. Can we scroll up one more page, Ms. Mullen? It looks mainly like he's discussing the current water season, which is a dry season.
Okay, so he's not discussing lands north of Wasco Road, right?
Well, I think in general he is, but in that statement, but it looks like most of those questions and most of the statements are referring to the current season that they're operating.
So in this April 10th, 1920 interview, Dr. House, which specific statement do you understand to be referring to Miller and Lux's lands north of Wasco Road?
I believe that the general statement at the beginning, where it states the practices to plant grain after the first rain, soften the ground up through some of the farmers, or although some of the farmers plant it dry. The tenants watch the weather and the snow on the hills. Unless there's plenty of snow in sight, they only the consequent prospects of a good water year. He kind of then goes into this year, the season is late, so it's not a good year. We look to the game right after that. The game is to farm every year sufficiently to break even and depend on the occasional good year to make a killing. I believe he's talking about the wet years there and maximizing the water use. He does not say anything specific here on lands north of Wasco Road that I see. He does talk about some that are south of Wasco Road, but in general, I think he does describe overall the general operations and the mindset without specifically discussing north of Wasco Road.
Do you have a sense of how much grain was grown on Miller and Lux's lands north of Wasco Road, Dr. House?
I believe it was about 1,500 to 1,800 acres of harvested grain that was stated.
And that's out of roughly 70,000 acres of land at Miller and Lux north of Wasco Road?
Roughly.
Do you have an understanding of how many tenants Miller and Lux had farming their lands north of Wasco Road?
I don't believe they had tenants. I believe they did that all themselves. And like I said, it was mainly irrigated pasture. Irrigated pasture is a crop. Pasturing is a crop. So while it wasn't grain, the grain was as stated by the Mr. Harding, who wrote these notes later on. It was further to the north along the Fowler Canal, I believe.
Just to be clear, Dr. Howes, you understand this interview to be primarily referring to the farming of grain, correct?
Objection, misstates testimony.
I'll rephrase. Dr. Howes, do you understand this interview to be referring primarily to the farming of grain?
No, I don't.
Okay. Do you understand it to be primarily referring to the farming of alfalfa for hay?
No, I don't.
Okay. What crops do you understand this interview to be referring to, Dr. Howes?
There's discussion of alfalfa and there's discussion of grain. I believe I get them mixed up. There could be even discussion of volunteer hay, but that might have been on a different day.
And let's take a look just real quick, and then I'm going to move on from this document. But the sentence that you quoted about making a killing, which reads, it's, I think, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines down. The game is to farm every year sufficiently to break even and to depend upon the occasional good year to make a killing. And then the very next sentence after that refers to grain, correct?
Yeah, but there's no paragraph breaks in this document, so it's hard to say if they're related or not.
Thanks, Dr. Howes. Let us move to Buena Vista 1402, please. And we'll talk about infrastructure. Let's look on page 2, please. And scroll down just a little bit, please, Ms. Mullen, so we can see Dr. Howes' outline on this page. All right, that's perfect. So if we look at the middle of the page here, Dr. Howes, you've offered an outline summary of how high flow water was routed to irrigable lands north of Wasco Road, right?
That's basically what I've shown.
Okay. One way was upstream of Second Point through Goose Lake, Jerry Slough, right?
That's correct.
And that would then route water into the Goose Lake Canal?
That would route water into Goose Lake. From there, it could be routed into the Goose Lake Canal.
And do you have a sense of whether some of that was First Point water?
Well, that if it goes through Goose Lake Slough and Jerry Slough, it's diverted upstream of Second Point. That's all I can say is it was diverted upstream of Second Point. So it could have been First Point water.
Okay. And then the other way was downstream of Second Point through the flood channel canal, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And then below your outline summary, you've written, as noted in the background materials for Bulletin 9 from the State Archives, the irrigation facilities on the Goose Lake Canal consisted of a series of weirs which throws the water out onto the land either side of this channel. Is that your testimony?
That's correct.
And that statement is from Buena Vista 1309, right?
Yes.
You didn't identify, did you identify any other irrigation facilities north of Wasco Road in this tech memo?
The flood channel canal, which would have emptied into a series of sloughs and swales, which were used for irrigation. But all of the water could have been routed into the Goose Lake Canal, but some was routed through the end, or came out the end of the flood channel canal north of Wasco Road into the natural sloughs and swales.
And so you'd characterize those natural sloughs and swales as irrigation facilities?
They were used to divert water for irrigation.
Okay. At the top of the page, you quoted a statement from Mr. Rice. Let's scroll up a hair, please, Ms. Mullen. There we go. There's Mr. Rice. And he's stated that the land to the north of Wasco Road is also checked up sufficiently to flood it in wet seasons for grazing purposes. But the irrigation of this land depends upon the water supply. And is that consistent with your understanding?
Yes.
You relied on Mr. Rice's representation in that interview to develop that understanding?
In the interview on those pages.
Yes. Okay, good. So now let's take a look at Buena Vista 1309 PDF page 12, please. And so this is a note dated April 14th, 1920, correct?
Yes, it is.
And I think I understood from Dr. Littlefield's testimony that Harding is the author of this note. Is that also your understanding?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And so Harding states in the first sentence here that he drove from Hart Station, where the Universal Oil Company has a pumping station, north and east through the Miller and Lux country to Fowler House near the county line. Is that right?
That's what it says.
And Hart Station is where exactly, Dr. House?
It's on the intersection of the flood channel canal and Wasco Road at
Okay.
the northwestern corner of Buena Vista Water Storage District.
Great. So then Mr. Harding goes on to say, this territory is reported by Mr. Rice as being in shape for flood irrigation during high water, and that it is regularly so irrigated in normal seasons, correct?
That's correct.
And then if we start looking 2 sentences down, Harding writes, it is a typical floodwater proposition. It would require a large head to get anywhere. Practically no check levies were noted on the trip. Do you see that?
I do.
And then he goes on to note that aside from one good-sized check levy, the irrigation facilities comprise a series of weirs across the Goose Lake Canal and a ditch from Goose Lake Canal near the Fowler House that carried water east 3 miles. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so aside from those facilities, isn't it fair to read Harding as suggesting that lands north of Wasco Road were irrigated by wild flooding?
I think it's important to understand that wild flooding is a technical term, as well as a flood water proposition could have simply meant that needs to be flood irrigated. So wild flooding, again, is a technical type of irrigation. It's not, let's say, an adjective to the way a flood might occur. So I wanted to make sure that that's clear. And it's still common in certain areas to quote unquote wild flood. So if you'd like me to define what that means, I'm happy to do that, but I don't want to.
Well, let me
already know what that is, then I don't need to.
let me ask you this, Dr. Howes. Do you understand Harding in these notes to be agreeing with Mr. Rice that the land north of Wasco Road is also checked up sufficiently to flood it in wet seasons for grazing purposes?
I don't think he was able to see a substantial portion of the area. It's hard to say exactly what areas he saw north of Wasco Road driving that route. So I can't tell you for sure what he was thinking when he wrote that, or agreeing or disagreeing. He did state that there weren't checked areas, and that's true just north of Wasco Road. We can see the swales and more quote unquote wild flooding areas as you get further down towards the northern end. I believe when he notes further down there that there are some 1,500 acres of grain planted, it seems like in that area he's noting that there is more normal irrigation, if you will.
And that 1,500, well, strike that. We know how big you think Wasco Road property is. Let's see. Let's go back to Buena Vista 1402. And Dr. Howes, does your technical memorandum identify any drainage infrastructure on the lands north of Wasco Road circa 1914?
Not that I recall, no.
And in your technical memorandum, you've described the area north of Wasco Road as being inundated in wet years, right?
An irrigation inundation, if you will. It's a kind of a shallow inundation, similar you might see in a meadow. I think that might get confusing to some, but that's what I meant by that term, inundation.
Okay, and you also determined that the water demand of Miller and Lux's lands north of Wasco Road could have been satisfied with an estimated total applied water range of somewhere between 100,000 and 168,000 acre feet, right?
That's correct.
And that's on approximately 32,000 acres of land, correct?
That's correct.
And this water was typically available as flood water, right?
I think it's better to say it was during a high water year. During a year when all 32,000 acres would have been irrigated, it would have been a substantially high water year. Whether or not we consider that a flood, I think that would I don't think we have enough information to specifically state that.
Do you recall Mr. Harding's comment that this was a typical floodwater proposition?
Like I noted, that could just mean the method of irrigation as opposed to the method of or the water supply. I don't know what he meant by floodwater or flood proposition.
Okay, so you don't have any understanding as to whether the water that Miller and Lux used or may have used to irrigate lands north of Wasco Road could be characterized as floodwater?
That's correct.
And at the upper range of your water demand analysis for those 32,000 acres north of Wasco Road, we'd be looking at a little over 5 acre feet per acre of water, right?
Excuse me, at the upper end,
Yes.
5 acre feet of applied water, that would be approximately correct, yes.
And so if that quantity of water arrived in a short period of time, it might well inundate the lands that you've described at a depth greater than, say, 3 acre feet. Is that possible?
That is, that I cannot verify. It is possible that some areas would have been inundated by more than 3 feet in depth, and other areas wouldn't have. So I don't. A short period of time would indicate that there's a flood. The soils probably couldn't absorb that much, but there's over the period of time that I analyzed, if the water was diverted, not even a significant amount of water was diverted past Highway 46, or sorry, Wasco Road, since we're circa 1914, it could have easily supplied that area. That's not, it's only about 350 to 500 CFS moving north of Wasco Road. So it's pretty, there's nothing unusual about that. If it all occurred in 1 month, sure, but there's a ton of hypothetical scenarios we can discuss, but yeah, I don't really want to get.
Yeah, and I guess that's kind of my point, Dr. House. You didn't try to analyze the timing of the availability of this water in performing your analysis, right?
No, I looked at the timing.
Oh, you did look at
Typical, if you read my technical memorandum, the typical time frame from 1938 to 1952, when water was moving past Wasco Road, is the same time I analyzed the evapotranspiration occurring. I did not look at if it only occurred in 1 month. I didn't have records that showed it only occurred in a vast amount in 1 month. And
So you looked at the general period in which these flows became available between 1938 and 1952, but you
Correct.
didn't try to specify the timing or run any scenarios of when those flows would be available under different conditions, correct?
No, the only records we had were from 1938 to 1952.
Okay. Let's, oh, and one other thing, just to make sure I got your testimony right, Dr. House, you indicated that the depth of water over the 32,000 acres of land that you identified could be variable, correct?
Excuse me, yes, it could be variable. It was probably fairly shallow, but definitely could be variable because the elevations were variable.
Okay, okay, very good. Let's go back. Actually, let's turn to page 4, correct? I'm sorry. Let's turn to page 4, please, Ms. Mullen. It's a good sign I'm using correct too many times. And I believe on this page, and let me, there we go. First paragraph, you've referenced an interview with a pumper at Hart Station from Harding's notes, right?
That's correct.
And Hart Station is at the north end of the current Buena Vista Water Storage District, right at Wasco Road, right?
That's correct.
So if you're looking north from Hart Station, you're looking out over the lands north of Wasco Road, correct?
That's correct.
And so this pumper here that Harding interviewed indicated that during high water, he's seen the whole country to the north on Big C, and that Miller and Lux camps were then inaccessible excepting in a boat. Is that right?
That's, I think it's one Big C. I may have had a typo there, or Harding did, but that's what the pumper stated. Yes.
Fair enough. We're talking about enough water to float some kind of boat on to access Miller and Lux camps, correct?
Yes, that's right. The Miller and Lux, hopefully they put their camps on high ground.
Yes, definitely. So wouldn't under these types of conditions, wouldn't some portion of the pasture grass that you use in your analysis to estimate irrigation demands be totally submerged?
Yeah, it's possible. That's not unusual. The submergence, it's likely that this would have only occurred for a relatively short period of time. And then it would have, as the inundation subsided and water flowed into the Tulare Lake to the north, it would have been unsubmerged, or in lower, the depth would have been lower. Again, I think we may have seen some areas that had inundation or water standing, and so those the types of grasses would have been able to withstand continuous submergence that would have stayed around. And so I think you'd see a variety of different types of grasses and other types of vegetation north of Wasco Road.
And you didn't conduct any type of analysis about how long water would remain on the Miller and Lux lands north of Wasco Road under conditions like the one the pumper at Hart Station described here, right?
There was no data to be able to do that.
Yeah. Is it good for these types of pasture grasses to be completely submerged in water?
That depends on the duration. Shorter duration, it wouldn't have a problem. A longer duration, it would not be good for the pasture grasses. But once the water receded, the next seeds would germinate and utilize the soil moisture that was there and any type of moisture that was subsequently put on via irrigation in subsequent months and days.
Do the pasture grasses that you analyzed in your technical memorandum, do they evapotranspirate when they're submerged in water?
So if you want to get technical about this, evaporation and transpiration are two separate things. Evaporation would be obvious from open water. We've discussed that. Transpiration.
Dr. House, I understand the difference between evaporation and evapotranspiration.
Mr. Bivens needs to let the witness complete his answer.
No, I need an answer to my question, and Dr. House is off on a tangent that I think.
This is
Well,
not.
all right, let's step back. For my benefit, we'll allow Dr. Howes to provide his brief summary of the difference between evaporation and transpiration, which may help me. And then we can move back to you, Mr. Bivens, and you can ask your specific question. Dr. Howes, to you.
Yes, so evaporation and transpiration are two separate events, if you will. Evaporation being from plant surface, from a water surface, or from a soil surface. Transpiration being the water that moves through the root zone, or through the roots, through the plants themselves and out of the stoma. When the plant is submerged, there would not be any transpiration, but obviously from an open water surface, there would still be evaporation. So yes, there would be evapotranspiration because they are combined. But if you want to get technical, I'm happy to do that, Mr. Bivens.
So, Dr. House, what you're saying is that water evaporates from an open body of water, correct?
That's right.
Okay, and plants are not transpirating when they are submerged in an open body of water, right?
If they're fully submerged, no. If they're partially submerged, yes, they will.
Thank you for that, Dr. House. Let's see, Ms. Kenzie, I could use a short break to think about how much more I want to do and how quickly we can move through this. Can we take 10 minutes?
Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to do something a little bit unconventional. I have some questions on this topic, so I would like to ask a few questions and then we can take a break
Okay.
and move on. I don't know if I don't think I have a lot of questions, but Dr. House, since we're on this topic of the pasture grass and the inundation, I thought it would be a good time to ask them. Will you, I'm wondering what kind of, you describe this as, I believe, as irrigated pasture and pasture grass. Is this, do you have any information, or is it your understanding that this would be native vegetation, or was it a seeded vegetation? We can go from there, but I'll try to limit my compound question there.
Sure. There really is no information specifically. I would, knowing the area today, I would say that it was probably seeded at one time, or the area had been inundated with non-native vegetation. Looking at the vegetation today, prior to circa 1914, I would hazard to venture that it was there were some perennial grasslands in this area. This was an area that was a swamp prior to development, and so it is probably transitioned away from what it was today, or what it is today. So I would imagine, I'm hypothesizing that it was probably a perennial, a mixture of perennial and annual grasses, native and non-native at the circa 1914. Today, though, it's almost all annual grasses.
Thank you, Dr. House. And then when you discuss these grasses, is it your understanding that the practice, based on your review of the information and documents, that the practice was to cut the pasture, or was it used for forage directly?
It was used for forage directly, north of 46, other than the areas around Fowler, for sure around Fowler Canal. Those seem to be irrigated, and they point to grain, which would have been more consistent water, consistent with a potential dry land versus wetland scenario, or irrigated scenario. They didn't get water that often. When they did, they would irrigate. When they didn't, they dry land farm that.
And then I think my last question, Dr. House, if you know, based on your review of the evidence, it sounds like this pasture was sometimes, or at least according to your opinion, at times irrigated, in the sense that water was applied to it. It sounded like you just told me that it may at one time have been seeded. Are you aware of other activities that may have been used to manage the pasture land?
Other than what was written by Mr. Harding, seeing the weirs on the Goose Lake, and then there's some references to using the swales and sloughs to irrigate the pasture. That's about the only references we have. Again, it's not uncommon, especially in areas that don't get water supply very often, to not invest a lot in those facilities. They try to use the water as best they can, trying to balance the economics of expensive facilities and only being able to use them once every 10 or 15 years.
And then it's not your understanding that the pasture would have been plowed or tilled, or
no, it was
any practice like that?
No, it's pretty straightforward that was a continuous pasture.
Okay, thank you. And then on the amount, I think Mr. Bivens brought up the amount of approximately 5 acre-feet per acre as the upper end of the estimate of applied water. I'm not sure how to phrase this specifically, so I'm going to make this question very open-ended. Based on your review of the evidence and just your general experience, is that a number that surprises you as high, or does that fit within your range of what you might see for an irrigated pasture, either historically or today?
Sure. I'm going to back up. The data I use to compute and estimate that is from actual measurements of a irrigated pasture, not a pot or a trash can or anything, but an irrigated pasture. The crop coefficients, I'm very familiar with. I've been working in evapotranspiration for for 25 plus years now. The crop coefficients are not unusual. They are high. And what's driving those to be high is that higher perched water table. So the pasture grasses have access to water supplies almost continuously. And that water table is fed by the irrigation, but they also are using that. The lower end of that estimate would have a lower perched water table. And so that's why I gave the range. I know there's a perched water table in that area. I know that during a high water year, that perched water table would be up. It's likely that they've used a lot more water during that time because they have less stress. But I don't know that for a fact. I wasn't alive in 1914. And so I think that looking at the range gives us a good ballpark estimate. That's why I gave the range. I'm not saying it's 168,000, but it could be, but I'm not saying that. That's the uncertainty in the analysis. It's probably closer to 120,000 acre feet if I had to make a ballpark given my experience with that, and the amount of time that the irrigation is actually occurring. If it's a shorter period, it's going to have lower evapotranspiration. If it's a longer period, it would have more. So there's a lot of variables. I think we're in a good range, a good ballpark range. Yeah, five seems high given the conditions. You think 1914, but plants are plants. They want to use water, just like second point, water users do, right? They're trying to survive. So yeah, I think it's a reasonable range. You're right, it is a little bit high. I can't guarantee that there was that high water table, and therefore that's why there is a range. I didn't just use the higher.
Thank you, Dr. House. On that point of the range, if you can help me understand it, would it be fair to say, see if I can phrase this. I mean, the lower end of your range that you provide is not the lower end of the amount of water that might have been applied. And in other words, I'll say this in two ways. Less water could have been applied and to the pasture and produced some amount of pasture. Is that an accurate?
Sure. Like I went through in my testimony, I think of it as a spectrum, right? If there's less water, there's less production. If there's more water, there's more production. We can think of it almost as you can go further north with more water, although there's going to be multiple irrigations later on and further into the season, and you'd get more production during a higher water year, even on the lands that aren't further north. But they definitely, you can think of it as a spectrum. If it's not as wet, it may only go, or the production would be lower. If it's very wet, it's going to be higher. So I'm looking at a maximum because that's, I believe, what your question was about.
So the maximum, and thank you. So the maximum range, the range that you provide is a range of a maximum based on assuming there was not a limit on water supply. Would that be accurate?
Well, I believe that during a maximum appropriation year, there would be sufficient water to irrigate 32,000 acres of alfalfa. That irrigation would result in a range of ETs depending on weather conditions and perched water table, which we don't know exactly what's happening in those years. And that's where it's coming to 100 to 168,000.
Thank you. I think I understand that now. Those are the questions I had. Thank you, Dr. House. I appreciate it.
Can I
Mr.
ask
Biggins,
one
yes.
follow-up about vegetation? And it was pretty hard for me to follow all of that, but I did hear some testimony about vegetation. And Dr. House, I think that Harding's notes actually speak to that. Can we pull up Buena Vista 1309, please? And it's PDF page 12. And I'm looking at the second to last sentence in this big paragraph at the top, which reads, vegetation is fair on this swamp grass, alphalaria, and foxtail. Do you see that?
I do.
Did you consider that type of vegetation in conducting your analysis?
Yes, that's typical pasture grass, a mixture of annual and perennial.
You would say that foxtail is a typical pasture grass?
Absolutely.
Okay, and swamp grass.
Well, and remember that this is in 1920, so it's a very dry year. Once during a wet year, the grass mixture would change because they're irrigating it, and more grass is going to come, or more vegetation is going to come up.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. House. I am.
You know, the term swamp grass is a little bit mixed. I take that as being a perennial bunch grass, as opposed to what is a swamp grass. So.
Well, and just to be fair, Dr. House, that meaning that you take, there's nothing in this document to suggest that it means what you've indicated, right?
Sure.
All right. Now I'm ready for a break, Ms. Genzi.
All right, I'm glad we got through that. Let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break. We will come on back at 4:02. And well, we'll discuss when we get back. Let's come back at 4:02. All right, let's get back to it. We're back on the record. Mr. Bivens, at this point, what is your estimate on how much cross you would like to continue with?
My estimate is 0, Ms. Kenzie. I'm done with Dr. House for cross-examination. I would like to make sure that I am able to reserve some time for recross to the extent of redirect, but I am done with cross-examination.
Certainly. Thank you. Then with that, I realize maybe it's possible we need another break, but I'll look to you, Mr. Becerra. Do you have redirect for Dr. House?
I do.
And do you need time to consider that, or were you able to do that over the break?
I'm ready to go.
All right. Please take it away, Mr. Becerra.
Ms. Mullen, can you please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 924? Dr. Howes, do you understand this to be a map from the 1919 Lippincott and Means report?
Yes, I do.
And Ms. Mullen, can we please drill down on the area just to the right of oil producing land? Where's the bottom? A little bit further, please. Thank you. Dr. Howes, do you see the area just to the north of Coal Levee?
Yes, I do.
Is there a channel there that appears to be in the approximate location of the Richfield bypass?
Yes, there does.
So is, based on this, is it your understanding a channel in approximately that location existed circa 1914?
It very well could have been, yes. There's
Thank you.
an obvious channel there.
Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 303? And can we please go to PDF page 2? I'm sorry, PDF 304. I'm sorry, Buena Vista exhibit 304. My apologies, Ms. Mullen. There we go. And can we please go to PDF page 2? And can we zoom in on the left side of that page? Very good, thank you. Dr. Howes, do you recall Mr. Bivens asking you a number of questions about water that went through the main canal, Alejandro Canal, and Richfield bypass on this page?
Yes, I do.
Well, in your opinion, how would that water have been routed with the facilities available circa 1914?
That water would have been routed through the inlet canal. If the Richfield bypass was in fact available, it could have been used as well. Excuse me. But the vast majority of that would have been routed in through the inlet canal into Buena Vista Lake, and then to the facilities that I described earlier.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Mullen, can we please pull up exhibit Buena Vista 218? We're looking for, I'm sorry, it's getting late. I'm looking for exhibit KWBA 218. My apologies. And can we please go to PDF page 70? And can we scroll to the next page, please, Ms. Mullen?
Excuse me.
My notes apparently are a little short. Dr. Howes, do you recall Mr. Bivens asking you questions about this report from 1939?
I do.
And he pointed out to you that Buena Vista Reservoir capacity was stated as 232 acre feet in 1939.
232,000 plus acre feet. That's correct.
Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Is that about 23,000 acre feet bigger than the lake was in 1914?
You mean the capacity?
Yes.
It is, yeah, the capacity is 23,000 acres, about 23,000 acres higher than the stated number that Mr. Bivens showed for, I think it was 1933.
As of 1914, what's your understanding of how water would be used once Buena Vista Lake Reservoir was full?
So I'm going to object. That goes beyond the scope of my cross.
Mr. Becerra, do you want to respond to that?
I believe Mr. Bivens was using that to question Dr. House's extrapolation of 1952 and 1938 information to 1914.
Well, what is the relevance? Maybe remind me of your question, but the relevance of how water would have been used from the lake, if you can connect that to the questions about the capacity of the lake.
In high flow years, I believe water that could not be stored would have been used to expand acreage that was farmed.
All right, I'll allow the question. Go ahead, Mr. Becerra. I don't know if you need to rephrase it for Dr. Howes.
I'll try. Dr. Howes, what is your opinion of what would have happened with water that could not be stored in Buena Vista Lake Reservoir because it was full circa 1914?
It would have been routed to the north to irrigate areas further north in Miller and Lux and Second Point Group properties.
Thank you. That completes my redirect.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. Based on that redirect, Mr. Bivens, do you have recross?
Nothing for me, Ms. Kenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens. So I think with that, I can thank Dr. Howes for your testimony today. Thank you so much for joining us once again. I appreciate you being here. I know it was a long day and I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey.
I think moving on, this is probably an appropriate time for me to address the outstanding objection, which is still outstanding, to Dr. Howes, portions of Dr. Howes' testimony that was filed by KWBA. Based on your opportunity for cross-examination today, Mr. Bivens, I've read the motion, but is there anything you want to add to your motion based on your cross-exam before I make a ruling on the admissibility?
Yes, two things I'd like to add. One is that Dr. House's analysis appears to be entirely speculative. And I think that was revealed, Ms. Kenzie, by some of the questions that you asked him about his analysis. And I heard repeated phrases like hazard a guess, and I believe, and I don't think that is the type of analysis that serious people rely on. Reasonable people rely on in the conduct of serious affairs. Number one. Number two, I think the objection that was, the opposition that was filed by Buena Vista kind of tells you all you need to know about whether Dr. Howes included sufficient information for us to be able to evaluate his analysis for north of Wasco Road in a meaningful way. Dr. Davids identified two very specific scientific issues that he indicated made it impossible for another reasonable expert to replicate Dr. House's analysis. And one of us never addressed that. I mean, it's a classic look over there opposition brief. So we continue to maintain that Dr. House's north of Wasco Road analysis should be excluded.
Thank you, Mr. Bivens. And I will turn to you, Mr. Becerra. Do you have anything you would like to add to your written opposition?
Two things. First, certainly in relation to experts' testimony, I'll note that Dr. Miltenberger stated in several places that in his opinion, certain things may have meant this or could have suggested that. If that's the standard we're talking about in terms of specificity, certainly Dr. House satisfies that. And then I'd just like to show one thing. Ms. Mon, can we please pull up exhibit KWBA 30?
And can you describe to me, Mr. Becerra, as it's coming up, what it is we're going to see?
This is the Lippincott means report.
And then why is it relevant to the?
It shows
upcoming motion?
there's a map that as of 1919 is useful. And can we please go to PDF page 207? If you compare this with the figure in Dr. House's testimony, Lippincott and Means as of 1919 identified almost exactly the same lands as class 1 and 2 and irrigable that Dr. House did. Certainly it was possible in 1919. It should be today.
Thank you, Mr. Becerra. I'm prepared at this point to rule on the motion based on the written papers in our discussion today and the cross-examination of Dr. House. I am going to deny KWBA's motion to exclude those portions of Dr. Howe's testimony about the number of acres of Miller and Lux lands north of Wasco Road that, in his opinion, Miller and Lux might have irrigated. Dr. House did describe his general methodology in his technical memorandum. KWBA had the opportunity to cross-examine him about his methods, and I think in this situation, it's appropriate to allow the testimony in the door. Now, that said, I have this function of reviewing the testimony, and I am going to consider the substance of the motion and the arguments there when assessing the weight of the evidence. And of course, those issues can be raised once again in any closing briefs. So I will not exclude the testimony on that basis, but I will consider it, consider the substance of the motion when assessing the weight of that evidence. With that ruling, I think we are at the end of Buena Vista's presentation of surrebuttal evidence. Is that accurate, Mr. Becerra?
Yes.
And then at this point, are you prepared to offer Buena Vista's surrebuttal exhibits into the evidentiary record for phase 1B? And let's also include any cross exhibits if you have those identified and are ready to go.
Yes, I am, Ms. Kendi.
If you would please identify the exhibits that you're offering for me.
Yes, they are Buena Vista 1300 through Buena Vista 1319. Buena Vista 1400 through Buena Vista 1404. And Buena Vista 1500 through Buena Vista 1506.
And Mr. Becerra, is the 1500 through 1506, are those your cross?
Yes, they are.
Thank you. Are there, other than are there any outstanding, or are there any, excuse me, I'm at the end of the day now too. Are there any objections that I have not already addressed to the admission of the Buena Vista exhibits identified by Mr. Becerra into the evidentiary record? So the exhibits are accepted. Those identified by Mr. Becerra are accepted into the evidentiary record for phase 1B. And then I think our final concluding step here would be to turn back to KWBA, this may be Ms. Tokar, to offer your cross exhibits into the evidentiary record for phase 1B. Ms. Tokar, are you prepared at this time to offer those exhibits?
Yes, we have 3 cross exhibits to offer: KWBA 428, KWBA 430, and KWBA 432.
Thank you. Are there any objections to the acceptance of these 3 exhibits into the evidentiary record for phase 1B?
Ms. Kinsey, could I just have a second to check my notes? Just
Absolutely.
recall what they are.
Yes.
We have no objection.
Thank you. Then with that, I will accept the 3 exhibits identified by Ms. Tokar into the evidentiary record for phase 1B. And on all of these, I wanted to add, I know that we're receiving corrected testimony from KWBA and Buena Vista. We may have already received it. If at any point you're reviewing the testimony and think there's been an error, of course, in the strikeouts or the correction, please just bring that to my attention by submitting something in writing. Now, I think we have completed this acceptance of evidence in phase 1B. The last item on my list that I'm aware of, well, one, I acknowledge I still have an outstanding motion for reconsideration from KWBA, so I have that. And then the last item I think for today is to talk about closing briefs, both a schedule and a length. And then I will issue a written ruling after this, setting out those deadlines and those lengths. Other than closing briefs, is there anything else we should talk about at this time? So maybe I will turn to KWBA first. Do you have a suggestion as to, well, let me pause for a second and step back. I want to keep this moving forward, and I want to set a schedule that works for everyone. But I am going to acknowledge now that I have a very busy fall, so I'm not interested in. There's no need for us to be on an accelerated schedule in terms of closing briefs. So you can make a little bit of a generous suggestion if you're inclined to do that. With that, Mr. Bivens or Mr. O'Brien, do you have a suggestion as to both the timing of closing briefs and the length of those briefs?
Maybe I'll take the lead on this one, Ms. Kinsey. Like you, I have a busy fall. I think I've mentioned this in other proceedings. I've got a trial starting September 26th that'll go through the end of October. So our thinking was either require the closing briefs to be in by basically the end of September, or we could, with the new information that your schedule is jammed, we could extend that out to a date maybe closer to November 1st. So that's number one. Number two, we thought it might be helpful to the hearing officer to have some opportunity for brief responding briefs, realizing we don't want to bury you with paper, but I am a little bit concerned the parties might talk past each other, so to speak, and I think it might be helpful to you if we could briefly respond to the other party's brief. So those are our thoughts.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien. I appreciate that. I agree that these are complex issues. These are very complex issues, and there are a lot of them. Do you have a suggestion as to how long after the initial closing briefs are filed, the response briefs should be due? How much time?
I would say at least 3 weeks, maybe 4.
And we haven't talked about length, but maybe let's set the deadlines and we can talk about length. Might be one thing at a time. So then I'll turn next to Buena Vista. Mr. Becerra, do you have any suggestions on this topic?
I think Mr. O'Brien's proposed schedule with a November 1 due date and then a response briefs by, I'm going to say November 23rd, day before Thanksgiving, seems to make some sense. I think it makes very good sense in my opinion.
Could we do it the Tuesday before Thanksgiving?
We could, yes, I would be happy to do that.
So,
And those are flexible in my mind. I mean, if we wanted to go after Thanksgiving, I don't see a problem with that, but I think we all want to be done.
I think after Thanksgiving might be worse. I don't.
Yes,
I would agree with that.
Okay.
yes.
Maybe on that proposed schedule of November 1st is the deadline for the initial closing briefs, November 22nd is the deadline for responses. Do any of the other parties have comments or concerns on that schedule? All right. Great. Those will be the deadlines. Now, what kind of page limits do you want? Now, these are complex issues. I want you to have an opportunity to say what you need to say, keeping in mind that we have many days of hearing and we've done a lot already in this proceeding. So I do want to be efficient and hold us to accountable so that you do have to digest the material for me, which is what is most helpful anyway. But there are a lot of things. So yes.
Ms. Kinsey, can I offer a proposal? Could we all submit a proposal briefly early next week? I'm tired, and I know all attorneys, when they get tired, want more pages, and that might not be the best idea.
Okay.
When I get tired, I want less pages, actually.
Well, we offer more pages. We don't really want to use them, but
Well, it will give you a chance maybe to talk to each other. It may be the best way. This is a little bit of a prisoner's dilemma, but if you can come to an agreement on a number of pages that you think is appropriate, that would be ideal. So let's do that. I thank you for the suggestion, Mr. Becerra. Let's set a deadline next week.
can I suggest Wednesday by 5? Gives us a little time to process Tuesday.
Sure. September 7th by 5 p.m. to submit something in writing to the AHO addressing page limits for both the initial closing brief and the responsive briefs. Are there any concerns with that direction? All right, and then I will make a decision and issue a ruling based on those, either the agreement or the suggestions. Is there anything else we should address today?
Thank you, Ms. Kinsey. Thank you, Ms. Mullen and Mr. Wooldridge.
Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everyone, today. Thank you for your efficiency. I appreciate it. And you'll be hearing from me next week. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.